It was always BS. That was the sugary coating that they put on top of some rather regressive policies that were designed to rip off the little guy.
Hello, I'm Bruce Berman, the host of Understanding IP Matters, a podcast series that looks at how IP rights enable creators and businesses to achieve and how they impact lives. Listeners who followed Season 1, thank you. Remember that all Understanding IP Matters episodes are available wherever you stream podcasts. We encourage your comments and welcome suggestions for topics and guests. Please contact us at explore@understandingip.org. David Lowery is a mathematician, writer, musician, producer, and serial entrepreneur. He is also the lead singer for two rock bands he founded decades ago and still tours with, Cracker and Camper Van Beethoven. Lowery has written more than 300 songs, and his groups are responsible for more than 15 albums and 4 gold records. He holds a PhD and teaches the business of music at the University of Georgia. He is critical of streaming services like Pandora Radio for shorting writers on royalties. He calculates that he earned less than $17 from 1 million streams of his song Low, less than what he makes from a single t-shirt sale. In 2017, Lowery settled a class action lawsuit he had initiated against Spotify for unpaid royalties. As part of the settlement, Spotify agreed to establish a fund worth over $40 million to compensate songwriters and publishers. The New York Times said that Lowery, quote, has come to represent the anger of musicians in the digital age. He says he has nothing against streaming services. He just wants to make sure they pay musicians and songwriters fairly. I spoke to Lowery from his home outside of Atlanta. Good afternoon, David, and welcome to Understanding IP Matters.
Hey there, how are you?
We're good today. Now, you toured with Cracker this summer. Does it seem like audiences are over COVID? Are they back?
We toured very minimally because it's still a little bit of a challenge. We have a patchwork of state regulations, so it's different going in different cities, what we might expect and how we have to prepare for it. Different states would, like, say, if there was an outbreak, say one of the crew people, different states have different rules about like what we're supposed to do, whether we're symptomatic or not. So we made it very minimal.
You started your first band, Camper Van Beethoven, in Santa Cruz in 83, I believe, 1983. What was life like for a band pre-internet?
Well, that was interesting because it was very difficult to find out information on things like copyright and your public performance rights organizations that manage the public performance aspect of the copyright. And so I remember this story. People asked me why I'm a member of the songwriters organization BMI and not ASCAP. And the story is that you used to a lot of times get these forms or get this information from going to the public library and asking the librarian. And we had a pretty good librarian in Santa Cruz. And so she knew what forms we should take. And, but she was all out of ASCAP forms. So I had to join BMI.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, it was literally going to a library and just, if you were lucky, if you had a good librarian.
You began speaking out on behalf of artists at various technology conferences, I think starting about 2012. What motivated you? Why that time?
Well, because that was shortly after SOPA. I don't know if people remember SOPA, but that was the Stop Online Piracy Act. It went down in flames in what appeared to be a grassroots sort of internet uprising, although I question how grassroots that was in retrospect. Anyway, I thought what got lost in the equation was that songwriters and performers were seeing their revenue rapidly decrease as a result of internet piracy directly and indirectly a bunch of follow-on effects from that. So I felt like nobody was speaking about this on behalf of songwriters and performers at these conferences, so I went.
Leading performers like Beyonce, Rihanna, for example, they benefit from visibility they are paid minimally for, such as on YouTube. They have the leverage, however. They can negotiate separate deals with some of the streaming services and that other acts can't. How has that affected the music business?
Well, if you look at the overall rates for all the sources of streaming per song, per track, you'll see that YouTube is the lowest, partly because they benefit from the DMCA safe harbor provisions, whereby your track can go up and it can stay up and people can watch it until you tell YouTube to take it down. It can go right back up again, though. So basically, most small artists have given up trying to police their works on YouTube. And even when they do, you're opting into a licensing scheme that pays you very, very little.
But the big acts, the well-known acts, they get millions of YouTube views. They're losing records, or not record sales, they're losing streaming or other sales, but they don't seem to care as much, or it doesn't affect them as much.
Any product that's a mass product can be sold for a cheaper price, right? Little ironic American flag t-shirt or something like that. Yeah, it's going to be $6. Something like this, my Brooks Brothers hand knit, this is going to cost you $100, right? So bigger acts are less impacted because they have billions of streams, right? Smaller acts don't have as many streams, so they're just not going to make as much money. It's not going to cover their fixed costs. Those low rates won't cover their fixed costs,
Is the environment worse today for small acts than when vinyl record sales and CDs were the media of choice and groups relied on record company advances, or is it better today?
Creatively, it's better. The gatekeepers going away was helpful, but I think that largely it's a much worse environment for most performers and songwriters. If you were a niche artist, you essentially had pricing control over how much you wanted to sell your vinyl for. You didn't have to discount it. Another thing is you could not release singles and just sell albums. In that way, you could get, you could kind of adjust the price and how you released your products to sort of cover your fixed costs that you can't really do today because everybody gets the same rate from a streaming service. So, that's why you see, I think genres like jazz have been absolutely decimated. They were the last ones holding on to physical products. And recently, most of the big distributors went streaming.
People don't seem to understand, David, the impact of cheap or free content on music quality, let alone performers. How does this play out?
Well, you see that, just gradually over the years, you have a tendency. Nothing wrong with pop. I like a lot of pop artists. I like a lot of interesting artists that are out there where they just sing basically with a laptop. But that kind of music can survive better in this environment than ensembles, right? Even the rock band with two guitars, bass, and drums, that's, needs to be recorded in a studio to get that authentic sound and stuff like that. And that doesn't survive as well. And so what you're seeing is, the acts that are better able to, kind of non-ensemble acts that can work with a singer and a laptop basically, tend to the predominant form now. So it's not like the other acts have gone away, but they're less of the market.
I think Rolling Stone said, back in 2020 that the top 1% of artists on Spotify make up 90% of the platform streams. Is that trend continuing or?
Yes. I saw a similar article about 2 years ago from another news source. It's in my slides next week. And in a way, it's kind of always been like that, but you sort of had this is where record labels were handy in that they sort of created sort of this risk and revenue sharing sort of structure. I remember when I was first signed to Virgin Records, somebody in the band was complaining about one of the pop artists on Virgin Records, might have been a Paula Abdul or something like that. And our manager goes, I don't want to hear that talk because they basically subsidize artists like us. How do you think it works? So there was some of that, like record labels, had their big pop hits and then they spread it across a lot of acts that, weren't necessarily the popular ones now, but maybe they thought they'd be more popular in the future.
Technology, David, has freed musicians to make quality recordings. 20, 30 years ago, you couldn't do this. You can do pretty good recording on your own today with minimal involvement from others or, studios. The challenge is getting heard amidst the content. There's a lot of content out there. If you build it, they probably won't come unless you have a distribution deal or something.
Yes, now we're faced with what we call the tyranny of choice, where you have a lot of aspirational artists where their, CDs and videos and streams or albums are out there, that you're competing with. So this is actually one of the contradictions of the digital era. While it became cheaper to make albums, although not as much as people think, it has become much more expensive to promote them. And I know this because largely I've been either on my own label or operated through independents, whereby we go out and hire independent publicists and independent promotions people. And largely the real skilled professionals, their rates have gone up. It's much more expensive to promote, to basically hire a publicist now than it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago, which is one of the contradictions because you've got a tyranny of choice. So you've got to overcome. I mean, you can get a record that pops right away, but most of the time what you're doing is you're pushing this thing over a period of 18 months, 2 years and stuff like that, much longer than you used to have to.
Tech companies seem to want to control pricing, content pricing, and they do a pretty good job of it, I would say. But they also like to control invention licensing. They don't want to pay for patents. They call that efficient infringement. Just basically use it and they sue us. If they sue us, we'll deal with it. What's with technology businesses? Why are they adverse to paying for creative content and inventions?
Well, I think what would really help is if we took a couple of examples and approached this as a law enforcement issue. I know that's not a popular viewpoint with a lot of people, but I mean, to set out to purposely infringe somebody's patent sounds like some kind of, or copyright, sounds like some sort of conspiracy to me. Maybe,
it's very hard.
That's not the right way to look at it, but
it's very hard to prove willfulness, but
efficient infringement sounds like willfulness to me, Bruce. I mean, I think you could make that certainly you can make that argument with copyright. I've looked at a couple of the RICO cases, and these were usually more physical piracy of things like DVDs and stuff like that. But
what happened to tech? They started out doing no evil and breaking things to make things better, but didn't wind up that way.
It was always BS, Bruce. I mean, there was always that was the sugary coating that they put on top of some rather regressive corporate policies that were designed to rip off the little guy and transfer all that money to a handful of Silicon Valley VCs.
maybe not the VCs, but certainly the investors. But I don't know if it's VCs usually get out pretty early, so some stick around.
Well, could be. I mean, we have seen I mean, certainly some of the, maybe not all of them, but I can think of an example of at least one VC firm that was pretty active in sort of anti-copyright stuff. So they knew what they were doing.
Taylor Swift, usually a loyal fan base, she stepped up in support of musicians at expense to herself. I think in her recent record deal, it's now maybe a year ago or more, I think the 3.4% equity stake that her label, Universal Music and Republic Records, has in Spotify, she stipulated that it's worth about $800 million as I currently calculate, that they spread that when they sell that stake to other musicians on the label. What's her thinking? What's her motivation in doing this?
I would say that's purely altruistic. She's not getting anything out of that. That was very nice of her to do that.
Yeah, and you're in the business world, music business world, yes. I don't know. I think I have a sense that she has a sense of history and sees how these things play out, not just for her reputation, but it's bad for music when you have 100 artists determining what's innovative and what's important. And that's sort of, the way we're going. I don't know if it's 100, maybe it's 500, but it's not a lot.
Right. Well, I think there's a history of that, of the bigger artists through the years have advocated on behalf of the smaller artists. I mean, Don Henley for a long time was doing something similar. I think it goes back to, I don't know. I mean, there are a number of people through the years who have done that, including people like, Sonny Bono, who eventually became like a congressman and was a very strong copyright advocate in Congress, right?
The Sonny Bono Copyright Act, right?
That's correct.
One that extended the act. But they say that benefited Disney more than anyone in his Orange County district.
Well, no, he was actually in the low desert because he represented my family, but that's kind of Hollywood in the desert, Palm Springs. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, all the big copyright holders wanted an extension, but one of the reasons that we extended copyright was because most of our partners had 70-year terms, not the 50-year terms. And I know, like, even Canada, Canada stayed with the 50-year term. And they eventually relented and have moved. I think if they haven't moved up to 70 years, they're going to move up to 70 years because it's just problematic. If you have a movie or a song that's in the public domain in the United States, but not in the UK, Germany, France, it gets really confusing. So I think more of that, the Disney angle has been overrated, and it was more like we were just trying to make things kind of regularizing everything with all of our trading partners.
You filed a class action, infamously by now, I guess, against Spotify and Napster. And what motivated you to do this? And did you get much support in your filing?
Well, we settled, so you could say we were right. Yes, we got a fair amount of support, but I was surprised how few people really realized that those class actions were out there in the songwriter and musician community. It took a little bit of effort to publicize those settlements and stuff like that.
So what was the settlement? I think it was 40 plus million, or?
Yeah, 43 million on the Spotify side, although there was some adjustments to that I don't quite understand.
And how does that get distributed?
You would register on the website for the class action that they have to put up, and it's already closed, and those funds have been distributed. But the reason I did it was because there was a class of songwriters, self-published, self-administered songwriters that don't use a music publishing company to administer their works, who were apparently not being paid royalties, their mechanical royalties from the streaming services. And there's a long, complicated story about how that happened, but ultimately Spotify was responsible, and the other streaming services, to a certain extent, also had the same liabilities. And so they were essentially forced to pay up.
Mm-hmm. It's never been easy for performers and recording artists. Is there a future for the working class musician and also the working class inventor, the garage inventor? It's very, very difficult to license these days. Will they be able to piece together a career?
Well, yes, we have something on that just started. One of the reasons it was so difficult for songwriters and performers to enforce their rights was because you had to go to federal court, which, I mean, I don't know, you need like 50 grand just to start, in my experience. So, same with, trademarks and stuff like that. We just started the Copyright Office, I think it's the end of 2020, passed this small claims tribunal for copyright. So it looks like first people to start using this seem to be a lot of photographers. It's an efficient way for them to take on some of these cases. I hope to see musicians start using this. I will say this, though. I was a bit skeptical because I saw what happened with your patent appeals process. I don't know that much about what's that called? PTAB or something? Yeah, we didn't want it to be the big guys, hurting our rights. So I think we learned some lessons from that. And I think this is actually the small claims court that we call it. I don't think that's the real name. The copyright small claims. I hope this is actually going to work for creators and not for the big companies.
Interesting. Yeah. The PTAB, I think 20% or so of the patents reviewed that are instituted, the reviews, are upheld. So all the claims are upheld. So why aren't those patents licensable? Then you start litigation from there. It's just it's a hurdle, but it's not an end.
Some of the music copyright activists that I know, we were sort of warned to make sure. So I don't really know a lot about that. It's just like that, watch out because this is what happened with the PTAB, right? So make sure you guys don't fall into that trap. And that was helpful for patent experts to give us that warning.
You recently won an award from the National Music Council, and I saw you said in your speech, I read, we are all fighting to protect our intellectual property, our copyrights, our neighboring rights, our patents, our trademarks, and our designs. We fight to protect them from freeloaders that too often convince policymakers and courts that in the name of innovation, they should have access to our intellectual property without permission or payment. Sadly, this is nothing new.
Yeah, the more it, what is it, the French? The more it changes, the more it remains the same. Unfortunately, you can see on the horizon the exact same story being told about non-fungible tokens, NFTs, there's a whole sort of racket that seems to be being built about, basically unlicensed NFTs for songs or for somebody's artwork or somebody's photograph or things like that. It keeps happening, right? And some of these folks, seem to portray themselves as innovators, that they're going to create this great new market and source of revenue for artists. And
have NFTs been net negative or positive for creators, would you say?
Well, there's been two platforms that launched, two different platforms that launched that sort of promise to provide you a minting of any song in existence. And certainly my songs seemed to have been offered there. The sites went down pretty quickly. And I didn't give anybody permission to do that. But it looks like one of the companies is trying to relaunch. So that is a battle. The operators of that site seem to be kind of trotting out the same language we heard from the past set of freeloaders, free riders, that they're, being innovative. They're creating a new market for artists and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, we forgot about the permission part,
So you're still playing now. You're teaching full time, and you're going out and you're playing. How do you manage all that? How do you juggle all those balls?
Weirdly, I hadn't really thought about it until I was brought on to just teach one class for one semester. And then I realized it's like, actually, this kind of matches my schedule because most of the time we're playing either on weekends or in the summer, the holidays. So when you're sort of more of a legacy act, those become your sort of main touring times. You're not going out and promoting a record to the college crowd. So you're not out there with the younger bands, the pop country bands and all of that start the middle of August and go through, Thanksgiving. So it matches really well with my schedule, but it also keeps me it keeps me very much engaged in and up on the latest events and things that are going on in the music business. So I think it benefits my students as well, too.
Where do you see creativity or creation for creators and inventors and brand creators? Where do you see that going? I mean, you think that with the internet opening up the way it has in 20 or so past years, it would create opportunity. And I think it does create opportunity, but it also has created some obstacles. How do you see the future?
I mean, this is a very complex story, but essentially the internet has been underregulated. Now, I'm talking about regulating in a different way than a lot of other people would. But like, for instance, it shouldn't have been so easy to throw up a pirate site registered in some other country and then disguise the true ownership, of that company. And then also put it beyond the reach of like U.S. law enforcement, right? I think we need to throw in a few more hurdles, but we need to throw in hurdles for the bad guys to get over, right? If we could adequately control who is distributing our music and songs, recordings and songs, I think it'd be much easier to monetize our works. I think there's a case for compulsory licenses in certain cases. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with, there's a number of compulsory licenses that govern copyrights in certain situations. I think if we could scale those back and provide more cases where, songwriters and performers even the little guy has the right to say no, we could really develop a better marketplace for recording some music.
Anything you'd like to add or comment on before we segue out?
Yeah, I'm planning this fall in November. I don't have the specific date yet, but I'm going to do another artist rights symposium here at the University of Georgia. We had before the pandemic interrupted us, we had really built that to something. So keep an eye out for that.
Oh, it sounds great. You should do creators' rights too. It's really, mm-hmm. I see copyright as sort of the tail that's wagging and trademark, the patent dog, if you will, that, mm-hmm. if people understood, they can relate to plagiarism. They can relate to counterfeits that, those are bad, mm-hmm. but patent theft, that's I don't know what that is. It's patent trolls,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's certainly something we could consider. That is, it would be interesting to draw some parallels between those worlds that are artist rights.
Understanding IP Matters is brought to you by the Center for Intellectual Property Understanding and its subscribers. To hear other episodes, visit understandingip.org. Follow CIPU on Twitter at Center for IP and on LinkedIn. This episode was produced and edited by Nathan Tower and Aaron Devereaux at Nonsensible Productions. Content conveyed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not reflect the views of CIPU or its affiliates.